In 1675, Isaac Newton wrote, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." The study of Wrangell history is no different. There are giants in the field whose work lift us all up. Today, on Wrangell History Unlocked, we'll take a deeper look at three historians who have contributed significantly to our understanding of Wrangell history: Patricia A. Neal, Bonnie Demerjian, and Pat Roppel. After that, we'll wrap up with a quick look at three books by other authors that tell unique stories from Wrangell's past.
There's gold in our garden, buried somewhere I've never been before. There's gold in our garden.
Chapter 1. Patricia A. Neal. Our first author has published 3 books on Wrangell history, each one expertly researched and filled with interesting details. Patricia A. Neal previously worked for over a decade as the Wrangell Museum director and curator. She brings years of experience in Wrangell history to her books. Patricia A. Neal's first book, published in 2007, is about Wrangell's wild frontier days. The book is entitled Fort Wrangell, Alaska, Gateway to the Stickeen River, 1834 to 1899. During the 1800s, Wrangell was the site of many power struggles, featuring the Russians, the British, the United States, and the indigenous peoples of Alaska. Wrangell sustained 3 gold rushes in this time and became one of Alaska's largest settlements. If you're interested in Wrangell's tent city days, these are the years to study. Fort Wrangell, Alaska, Gateway to the Stickeen River, 1834 to 1899, is a well-written narrative of the history of Wrangell from prehistory through the beginning of the 20th century. Patricia A. Neal's second book was published in 2012, entitled Stickeen River Journal, Early Days on the Stickeen River. It's an excellent companion to her first book. Where the Fort Wrangell book is a narrative that weaves together a full story start to finish, this book is packed with short articles, clippings, and short stories. Each section is no more than a few pages, making this a fun book to read on the go. Stickeen River Journal, Early Days on the Stickeen River, is fast and unpredictable, like the times it describes. Patricia A. Neal's most recent book came out in 2016. Wrangell Garnet Ledge History is the true story of 2 lifelong partners, Anna B. Durkee and Mary T. Elmer, who came to Southeast Alaska in 1906 to investigate a copper mining claim. During a layover in Wrangell, the 2 women learned about a garnet mining claim near the mouth of the Stickeen River. They hatched a plan to buy the claim for $1 million by raising the funds from women they knew back home around Minnesota. Together, these women incorporated as shareholders of the Alaska Garnet Mining and Manufacturing, the first American corporation fully run by women. Men were only employed to work in the mines. Wrangell Garnet Ledge history is the type of story I aspire to do on this show. It's not just captivating because it's a first for American women, but it's a story about people going up against the odds, challenging the norms, and being successful. Patricia A. Neal did lots of research to bring this story to light, including contacting living descendants of the story's main characters. My favorite person in this book is Cleora Sprague, the 62-year-old woman hired to guard the mine from claim jumpers. She dressed like a man, carried a rifle, and went by the nickname Napoleon. There's even a story about her dog, Muggins, who had been a stray dog in Wrangell that became a nuisance and was set to be executed, then found his second chance at life living as her companion at Garnet Ledge. Our next author today is also a scholar devoted to understanding Wrangell and its unique relationship to the Stickeen River. When we come back, we'll explore the books of Wrangell historian Bonnie Demerjian. Chapter 2, Bonnie Demerjian. Bonnie Demerjian has held a number of positions in Wrangell, in the schools, writing for the Wrangell Sentinel, and becoming a published author with her first book in 2006. Roll On, Discovering the Wild Stickeen River is named for the Woody Guthrie song, Roll On Columbia. The book is a full 360-degree look at all the topics of the Stickeen River. It's got biology, geology, politics, history, and economics of the Stickeen River. The Stickeen is an integral piece of Wrangell history, and this book has it, along with a deep study of the natural sciences of the region. This book is a terrific companion to have on the Stickeen River. There's something for you, whether it's about the flowers at your feet, the mountains above, or the history of the spots nearby. Wrangell has always been more than Wrangell Island. After all, what would Wrangell be without the water? Bonnie Demerjian's second book, Annan, Stream of Living Water, is a study of Annan, a natural saltwater lagoon south of Wrangell Island. Annan is famous for its salmon runs, wild bears, and U.S. Forest Service observatory. According to the Forest Service, during the salmon run, from late June to late August, visitors may also see brown bears, bald eagles, several species of gulls, and harbor seals in the area. Annan, Stream of Living Water, and Roll On, Discovering the Wild Stickeen River both feature beautiful photography by Ivan Simonek. These are both important works that affirm the importance of understanding Wrangell not just in terms of the island's coastline, but its connection with the waterways nearby. Bonnie Demerjian's third book is really one of my favorites. Wherever you travel in the United States these days, you often see the Images of America books by Arcadia Publishing. The series features old photos of America's cities, small and big. In 2011, Bonnie Demerjian published Images of America, Wrangell. It's got tons of great photos of old Wrangell, showing you the places and faces of Wrangell's past. The captions to the photos contain a ton of research as well. There's great, easily accessible information right here. This is my favorite book to crack open with people who know Wrangell. You're looking at old photos, and suddenly it clicks. You imagine yourself there, knowing exactly what it's like to stand on that spot. This is a fun coffee table book, because its large photos are easily engaging for readers of any age. Bonnie Demerjian's latest book is Rock Art of Southeast Alaska, published in 2015. Most histories of Wrangell focus on the past 200 years. This book talks about Wrangell over 10,000 years ago, as the first humans migrated from Asia through Southeast Alaska. These earliest people left behind cryptic, symbolic artwork in the rock, in carvings called petroglyphs, and rock paintings which survive today. Many pieces of ancient rock art have disappeared, but perhaps many more remain to be discovered. Why did people leave these rock carvings? What do these faces, animals, and shapes mean? Rock Art of Southeast Alaska explores the different theories offered by artists, anthropologists, Alaska Native descendants, and others. The most compelling and interesting theory I found was that rock art may have been carved in a trance. Shamanism has ancient roots in Southeast Alaska, and shamans were known to enter trance-like states through fasting and other methods. The rhythmic, repetitive process of tapping out a pattern on a rock may have induced a trance in the artist. This may help explain why some rock art shapes, such as the spiral, are found by ancient rock art carvers around the world who experienced the same phenomena. Next, we'll talk about a historian with 50 years of published work in Alaska history. Her pen is prolific and reaches into the work of many historians. When we come back, we'll survey the works of Pat Roppel.
When we said that we would stay, we watched them count their losses with blistered hands. We waved
Chapter 3. Pat Roppel. It's hard to assess the full body of Pat Roppel's work. She authored 13 books and at least 100 articles. She edited, reviewed, encouraged, and inspired many Alaska historians in their work. Her name appears in countless acknowledgments and dedications. She was named Alaska Historian of the Year twice. She was a member of the Alaska Historical Commission, the Alaska Humanities Forum, and the Tongass Historical Society, the latter of which established a scholarship for Alaska history students in her honor. Pat Roppel is a historian's historian. Pat Roppel moved to Ketchikan, Alaska in 1959 with her husband Frank. She taught home economics and began down the path of studying Alaska history. She published her first article in the Alaska Sportsman in 1965. What followed were 13 books, countless articles, and a weekly column run throughout the newspapers of Southeast Alaska. When she was not publishing her own books, she was helping other authors by reading manuscripts to construct into index pages. Many of Pat Roppel's published works go back decades and are out of print, making for a treasure hunt to get them all, and difficult to individually describe here. Pat Roppel's first book, Southeast Alaska's Panhandle, is part of the Alaska Geographic series and published in 1978. She published 12 more books throughout the decades, including her last in 2014, Steamboat Bay Cannery Historic Survey and Architectural Recordation with Stephen Peters. From 2004 to 2010, she published a monthly newsletter for the Friends of the Wrangell Museum. In total, she published 72 issues, each one packed with stories from Wrangell and its environs. Pat Roppel passed away on January 6, 2015, almost 50 years after the publication of her first article. When she passed, the Alaska Historical Society wrote, "We lost a friend, a mentor, and a trailblazer of a historian at the beginning of January when Pat Roppel died. No one has done more to document the history of canneries in Alaska than Pat. From her seminal work, Salmon from Kodiak, to her weekly columns that tracked the trajectory of canneries, salteries, and fishing boats published in the Capital City Weekly, Pat's canon of work is voluminous and far-reaching." Patricia A. Neal's Wrangell Garnet Ledge History is dedicated to Pat Roppel. In the dedication, Neal wrote, "Pat will be missed, but she has left a legacy of historical knowledge that will live on. I will miss her encouragement, her vast knowledge about mining in Alaska, her humor, and that she was only an email away after I left Alaska." Pat Roppel's prolific pen means her research and her voice lives on. When we come back, we'll wrap up by quickly surveying 3 books by different authors that each shed a light on a unique piece of Wrangell history.
When we said that we would stay, we watched them count their losses with blistered hands. We waved goodbye and pulled the nails out of our crosses, and oh, what nice weather we're having. Oh, my.
Chapter 4. Recommended Reading. There are many, many excellent books featuring Wrangell's unique past. Here are 3 books by different authors that stand apart. The first book is Kataha, A Tlingit Girl. If you're new to Wrangell history, I always recommend starting here. Through the story of a young girl, you get to see what Tlingit life was like in Wrangell before and after the arrival of the United States. Kataha was one of the first to join the Presbyterian Mission's Industrial School for Girls, run by Amanda McFarland, and she quickly became an influential part of the church. Kataha's life tracks in parallel with the major historical changes in Wrangell at the time. Of course, Kataha would grow up to become Tilly Paul Tamaree, a real force in Wrangell's history and the mother of William and Louis Paul, highly active in the Alaska Native Brotherhood. Tilly recounted her childhood stories to her daughter-in-law, William's wife, Frances Lackey Paul, according to the description from the back of the book. Frances Lackey Paul taught Tlingit children in a Juneau school early in this century. She wrote Kataha in 1938 for her students, who asked for stories of their own world. A true-life story of a Tlingit girl who lived in Southeast Alaska in the late 1800s, the book is filled with authentic details of daily Tlingit life, social customs, legends, and adventure. Though the book is intended for young people, it does not spare the tragedies. There are heartbreaking moments from Tilly's childhood, like the death of her mother and being forced into a marriage against her will. Frances Lackey Paul captured her mother-in-law's story and put it into an easily readable format. The book is not long, and each chapter is short. Frances Lackey Paul passed away in 1970. 6 years later, Kataha was published featuring illustrations by Ree Munoz filling the pages, imaginatively depicting the people and scenes in Tilly's story. The second book today is Bastard of Fort Stikeen, the Hudson's Bay Company and the Murder of John McLaughlin, Jr. Published in 2015, this book is a gripping, well-paced historical murder mystery, examined with fresh eyes by crime scene forensic anthropologist Debra Komar. Bastard of Fort Stikeen takes place in Wrangell in the 1840s, a time when Britain leased and occupied Russia's abandoned post. The Brits were met with misery virtually from the start. Unhappy Tlingit neighbors, limited provisions, blistering weather, and seawater creeping under the fort's walls. A mutiny formed against the commander. From the book's description in Publishers Weekly. In April of 1842, Chief Trader John McLaughlin, Jr. was assassinated by his own crew of workers at their Hudson's Bay Company post on the Pacific Northwest coast of Canada. The men were known to have disliked McLaughlin, and some had threatened to kill him, but the company's governor, Sir George Simpson, relied on their accounts of the incident to conclude that the murder was a matter of self-defense against McLaughlin's drunken rampages. Though the company closed the books on the matter without a trial, McLaughlin's father never relented in his efforts to disprove Simpson's version of the facts. The author, Debra Komar, is a forensic anthropologist who often turns her analytical lens on crimes of the past. This story has everything: a murder, a cover-up, power, ego, and one father's struggle to redeem his son's good name. Once I picked this book up, I could not put it down. This book contains the single best explanation for why Russia built a fort in Wrangell that I have ever read. Komar describes it like a chess match between the crowns of Russia and Britain, competing for power and control across the earth, coming to a clash in Southeast Alaska, in Wrangell. The last book I'll share today is Proud Raven, Panting Wolf by Dr. Emily L. Moore. Dr. Moore was raised in Ketchikan and earned her Ph.D. in the history of art from the University of California in 2012. An article in the Alaska Press sets up the story of Proud Raven, Panting Wolf. In Southeast Alaska, between 1938 and 1942, the Forest Service and the Civilian Conservation Corps, under Roosevelt's New Deal, restored and replicated totems, which were then planted in European-style parks, as a way to employ those in the Pacific Northwest in native jobs, boost tourism, all with little regard for any cultural significance. And like many government programs, what was cooked up in Washington was idealistic, but would evolve quite differently when put into actual operation in situ. Ironically, the project propelled totems into the 21st century as an art form. Wrangell was one of 6 communities selected by the federal government to receive totem parks. Wrangell was the only park with its own island. Proud Raven, Panting Wolf features interesting stories about the intersection of art, culture, and government to produce Wrangell's iconic Shakes Island Clan House. A book review in the Journal of the Association of Historians of American Art summarized Dr. Moore's 3 main arguments. The totem parks are aesthetically, culturally, and politically significant. The parks were part of a larger cultural nationalist movement that sought to identify and preserve America's heritage, and Tlingit and Haida communities played an active role in the creation and representation of the totem parks, mobilizing the project to advance broader claims of self-determination. Before we end today, I want to thank each of the authors I mentioned: Patricia A. Neal, Bonnie Demerjian, Pat Roppel, Francis Lackey Paul, Debra Komar, and Dr. Emily L. Moore. I admire each of these authors for their tenacity in both the research and the writing. They've each dug into a topic important to understanding Wrangell's history, and they've found gold. I can't recommend these books enough. I've enjoyed them, and I hope you do too.
There's gold in our garden. Of this I am sure.
Wrangell History Unlocked is written and produced by Ronan Rooney. Music from today's episode is Gold in Our Garden by Dara Relatus.